Hello and welcome to the SmackDown Preview podcast. I'm Adam Wilborn from What Culture, joined by the Dadley boys of What Culture, Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick, here to preview tonight's episode of SmackDown on Fox. But before we get into it, if you're a fan of this sort of thing, make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling on either iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts from, for daily wrestling podcasts, where we not only review Raw and SmackDown, but also the Wednesday Night War between AEW and NXT, pay-per-views, we have interviews, roundtable discussions, and a roundup of the week, complete with a bloody good quiz, of course, on wrestle culture. But as I said, joined by Michael Hamflett and Michael Sidgwick to preview tonight's episode of SmackDown. A very weird atmosphere, it's fair to say, after what many are dubbing Black Wednesday for WWE. We've sort of previewed this by saying WWE releases dozens of wrestlers and then expects us to care about SmackDown. How, or even can WWE use SmackDown to rebound from Black Wednesday, Michael Sidgwick?
Right, okay. Hello, YouTube out there. You might notice that I'm wearing quite a snazzy little tropical shirt number from Primark in the United Kingdom. This outfit might suggest to you that I am indeed ready for a good time. I want to make it abundantly clear that I'm not ready for a good time. I would not watch SmackDown were it not my job. I'm in absolutely no mood for WWE after this week, for empty arena wrestling in general. I'm wearing this shirt because it's a blue sky out there. I've got a recent taste for margaritas. I'm about 2 or 3 away from perfecting my recipe. And after this is done, I'm going into my garden. I'm not ready for a good time. WWE will be unable to wash away the stink of their actions this week. I'm no selling this show.
I like that Sidgwick references that we watch this for work at the moment, but SmackDown would feel like a duty, even if it wasn't a literal duty. The empty arena era outside of the one night Triple H bullied Michael Cole has been pretty disastrous viewing. And in light of Wednesday, it almost encourages you to dislike it. And I should point out, as we always have to, it won't be a case of disliking the talent. It won't be a case of disparaging the talent for working hard in circumstances that are really unfavorable and unenviable. But the show and the company and everything that this represents feels as wrong-headed as they have done in months, maybe years.
I should point out that Michael Sidgwick, if you see him glancing at his phone, is keeping an eye out just in case whilst we are live here on YouTube. And if you want any questions asked, please feel free to put them in the comment section below, just in case there are any more WWE releases whilst we are live. Hamflett, do you reckon there's a chance of that? Do you reckon they could happen before or even after SmackDown tonight?
Oh God, I hope not. Obviously, just generally, I hope not, because 50 is too many. So any more is more than that. There was an uncomfortable coincidence to the fact that there was some heavily Raw-based releases on Wednesday and a couple of NXT ones ahead of that brand, almost as if they were going to get to this show by show as and when they needed to use talent, which is grim. I still can't shake that No Way Jose and Sarah Logan will have to go to work or asked to do the job and then have the jobs taken away from them. So I would hate to think that would happen to anybody working the show tonight. The idea that you risk so much to do this unimportant, unnecessary task and then lose the right to even do that task ever again and lose the wage that goes with it is so ugly and hideous. It's the worst part about this generally awful time. So I genuinely hope this is the end of it. But that's assuming that that's just a this week thing. What if the cuts continue? What if the reason for these cuts in the first place was because Vince McMahon and his close-knit relationship with Donald Trump is revealing more knowledge that he's keeping to himself, and that this will be a months-long thing? The longer we are in empty arenas, perhaps the more cuts that will follow. The ramifications of the stockholder chat that Vince has next week could result in even more to come. I've worked, as I'm sure many of our people watching and listening have, in companies where redundancies happened before, and it's like ripping off a plaster. Once that's off, it never kind of can go back on with the same potency as it did once before. Redundancies have been made, cuts have been made, and there's always a chance there could be more now. Just because talent get through tonight, I imagine they'll still be stressed next week and the week after and the week after.
Sid, before you give your answer, Colin Sullivan in the comments says, do you think they're even going to address the horrible thing they've done? I sense I know the answer to this, but I figured you'd be the perfect guy to ask.
This is far worse and far more significant than, for example, to use a recent example that they simply no-sold, when Roman Reigns was out of the match because he's immunocompromised at WrestleMania 36. They just had the balls to flash up a match graphic as if it was like this all along. We were basically, and I don't want to use this term, like insensitively, but they basically gaslighted their audience into thinking, oh, well, this match was always the way it was going to be. So, sorry, what was the original question? When you asked it to Hamlet,
Could there be more releases?
Oh, Christ. Again, I hope not. I absolutely hope not. But the weird way that we don't want to slander WWE, but realistically, the corruption that they've engaged in recently and their close ties with the Trump family really started to get my tinfoil hat hovering above my head as if they are privy to insider information, hence why they've decided very suddenly to go live. But away from all of that, if you look at the mentality of this company and how strictly they value the dollar over the humans that toil for them, even if this thing unfolds for months at a time, they could get told by the government, right, okay, it's going to be another month. Even that might panic McMahon into thinking, right, we can let a few more go here. We can let a few more go here. He's not one to. He's a very irrational, impulsive man, Vince McMahon, from everything I understand of him from afar. And he's callous and he's awful, and it doesn't take much for him to make a rash decision whatsoever. So, yes, I expect more to come, sadly.
Don't forget, as I said, any questions you want asking, we will get to them at the end. Stick them in the comments section below. But seeing as I am here in the Firefly Funhouse, let's talk about tonight's episode of SmackDown. The big news, I suppose, heading into it, the SmackDown tag team titles on the line. It is going to be a sort of reverse of what we saw at WrestleMania, minus the ladders, as far as I can tell, Michael Sidgwick. The Miz versus Jey Uso versus Big E. How do you see this one going?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I've forgotten who the champions are. Is it Miz and Morrison still?
Still Mr. Morrison, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, they've what did they do? Oh yeah, they made the baby faces look like dickheads at WrestleMania 36. So that's why the heels have still got the titles. Yes, I remember perfectly well. Now, this is such an odd match. Like, the weirdest and most negligent and dangerous circumstances imaginable enforced the complete oxymoron that is a triple threat match between three singles competitors for a tag team title. Now that, as far as I'm aware, well, obviously the Miz is cleared and back to action because he's involved in this match. Why are they doing this for a second time? Because it's in some way cute. I just don't understand why they've done this. It's like they've made a silly match that makes no sense through enforced circumstances, and they're doing the reverse because I don't know. I don't know. I expect to be less facetious if there's people out there and they're lunatics wanting a good faith, earnest analysis. I expect John Morrison to interfere on behalf of the Miz, and then the tag teams then play the role of Teddy Long and say, well, we're all tag teams. Why don't we have a tag team match player? Because we're tag teams. It's stupid.
I would only have been more surprised if WWE had done never before, never again at WrestleMania, and then
why would we bother
again tonight? How do you feel about it?
Yeah, this sucks as hard as Raw sucked, because what became apparent when they started going back live again is that WWE are trying to return to the normal version of themselves in this, the new normal. Cedric's book in there is bang on. The Miz will win through nefarious means, even though there's no disqualifications in a triple threat, leading to the actual WrestleMania match take place next week, because this is exactly how they would book it if there was arenas full of fans that would just be happy to see the stars. You know, it doesn't matter that, like, since everything that's happened that caused that WrestleMania match, the Miz's most effective finishing move now is probably a sneeze. Like, I'd run a mile. But, like, it's just so ugly to think about why we've even arrived at this point. And yet WWE will treat this like generic common or garden, like, tag team bait and switch booking. We will have a finish here. The heels will retain. We'll probably get the triple threat tag match next week. And then we can have another fairly similar conversation as we're having right now about who's going to win the titles. It couldn't feel more meaningless. The tag team titles aren't always lumped in when we talk about how secondary titles don't matter, but this falls even below whatever the hell's happening with the Intercontinental title or the United States title on Raw or anything like that. They've never felt in poorer shape. I don't like seeing matches that mean things take place on this empty arena show, because it feels like they're telling the loudest lie, and that's the case here. And I don't have a lot of faith that the match will be that entertaining.
Speaking of why are you doing this, Tamina is back around the title scene. But before she can challenge Bayley, she has to get through Sasha Banks tonight. It's obviously sort of being involved in a wider storyline with Sasha Banks and Bayley, of course. But what do you make of this, Hamlet?
The Sasha and Bayley angle is pretty good. They're dropping more and more stuff in that give you something to watch on a show that you don't want to watch. Bayley continually negs Sasha Banks and drops little clues in that it's all about her. Sasha started giving those little knowing looks towards the belt and all those like nice clues that we just like in our standard pro wrestling. And this match will feed into that. You know, Bayley's probably going to help Sasha at the very, very end. So Sasha will get an absolute pasting and Bayley won't do much about it. But then ultimately she's got to win because it's only Tamina. Like, not to be disrespectful, but she's just not a focused upon character. Now they've done the big pre-WrestleMania dominance moment and then had everybody pile on top of it for the pin. That's about as much as you can get out of Tamina as a monster figure. So Sasha has to go over here. I genuinely do like this angle, and I think they're doing quite well to have it play out in this empty arena because it's not reliant on crowds or anything like that. It's reliant on those at home on television spotting what's being dropped. I don't think it's going to be any good. I don't think the chemistry in the past has suggested that the match will be any good. I'm quite into the angle. So I think, you know, that, if nothing else, will be something that we've got to talk about next week.
Unity! Was that the crack? Unity?
It was, isn't it? Yeah.
Aye.
It was bad. It was really bad.
It was really bad, wasn't it? Jesus Christ. And I expected that of Wilborn. I expect better from you, Michael Hamflett. Don't you dare plumb to those depths ever again. Yeah, I'm stalling. I'm stalling with terrible crack here because how can I preview in good faith Tamina versus Sasha Banks? Speaking of unity, I expect that the people who dislike me in comment sections, mediums over, that they might think, you know what, Sidgwick, I'm with you. I can't be arsed with this match either. I mean, I feel kind of harsh for Tamina because, like, she had an appearance on, I think it was Lillian Garcia's podcast in the not too distant past, maybe last year, where she sort of was very sad and very cognizant of the fact that she knew people were receiving and previewing her work in such exasperated, apathetic tones. And, you know, I'll say one thing about Tamina. She's not overtly dangerous. That's good, isn't it? I mean, that's not bad. She's just never done anything for me as a worker. I just think, God bless her, she chose the wrong profession. I'm sure she always projects herself as a lovely person.
I want to talk next about the Sonya and Mandy.
God, we just crap at wrestling. I'm sorry.
Hey, Cedric.
I want to talk next about the Sonya.
I do feel sorry for her. I do genuinely feel sorry for her. Carry on, Wilborn.
Well, one of the really disappointing things, along with all the WWE releases, of course, they're all terrible, that I saw was the fact that the writer behind the excellent, really well-built Otis and Mandy storyline has gone, or has been at least been furloughed. Mandy Rose and Sonya Deville are supposedly set for clear the air talks tonight. How are WWE going to handle this now, Sidge?
Oh, I don't know, but the perverse Schadenfreude part of my soul wants this to play out in a live empty arena setting so it looks like the amateur dramatics that it is. I did enjoy the storyline. It's absolutely not my thing usually whatsoever, and in fact I thought Otis, the way they blocked him as following Mandy around backstage, like, I didn't find that cute at all. But, you know, ultimately, and this is such the curve that we speak of now, ultimately they told a story that had a very well cast babyface, a very well cast heel. They plotted it and mapped it out so that it peaked at WrestleMania. It was really professional stuff. It was really kind of fun stuff. They had some spectacular content between Tucker and Otis ahead of the date. And they've sacked the writer who did the one good thing on SmackDown. So that's not very good at all. I don't know. I think that, oh my God, could we see the hacker?
I hope so.
Could we see the hacker tonight? Oh my God.
I mean, he was the one that outed the truth, wasn't he? That was the big grand payoff. I mean, sorry, just on that furloughed writer, I think it's good we got another bloody woman out of that writer's room, because there was probably too many of them on SmackDown, wasn't there? You know, like there were a lot of these female characters were getting a little bit too much of a voice for Vince McMahon, weren't they? That's gross. That's absolutely grim. In his company historically has never had women with a loud enough voice in this company. When we've got evidence now that a storyline that has actually like had a woman have a prominent role, have two women have a prominent role, and then she's the one that's been selected to be like, "No, we don't need your work." Yeah, so I have fear for this now, because obviously the person that was holding the wheel has been taken out the car. I love Sonya Deville and Mandy Rose. They've probably, I wouldn't say they've been held back, but they've just, it's almost like the company's held off on using them in the way they could do as both wrestlers and performers in the last year or so, as they've grown more and more into this role. So I really like this to be good. And yet I've got fears it won't be, because if it's done in the ring, the empty arena will present the most horrible sound of silence for this like overly scripted drama that they'll have to play out. The hacker would be a bit of a get out of jail free card for them. So for them, at least, I hope it will be good. I would have no problem with something that's been already pre-taped, or something that has a bit of like boneyard match flair about it, because I just think it's more interesting. I think it's something interesting to watch, and I'd like these characters not to be let down by the circumstances they find themselves in. I think the match, even between them, will be good. So the better this is, the better this is for the characters as well. They don't deserve the circumstances they're being forced into here.
We've got 2 Money in the Bank qualifiers for tonight, and then we'll move on to some of the questions we're getting in the comments section. Daniel Bryan versus Cesaro. This should be spectacular. And, you know, one of these men being in the Money in the Bank ladder match is a good thing, Michael Hamflett.
Yeah, it's probably a better thing with Cesaro being in the match, because Daniel Bryan's wife doesn't want him anywhere near this for a living while she's pregnant. So the less he has to do, the better for them. But Bryan and Cesaro as a match is the kind of thing that we have complimented in other reviews. So we can't be hypocritical about this. They will hit each other really hard, or at least make it look and sound like they are. And those are the matches that have been the warmest received in this empty arena period, because it just feels like it feels like something that suits the environment. You're watching a fight more than a preordained contest, a preordained performance. So it'll probably be one of the highlights of the show. And yeah, I think it would be far better if Cesaro, for the optics, I feel like it would be far better if Cesaro qualified, but I'll probably go with Bryan. Naomi and Dana Brooke. This is just one of them lousy women's division things where Naomi wins because she's the star and Dana isn't. They don't have the depth to make something competitive when they're doing these qualifiers.
Yeah, I firmly expect Naomi to go over as well. I think she could do some really creative stuff in a ladder match. But the problem is they shouldn't be doing a ladder match, because there's no adrenaline to carry them through a ladder match. And on the subject of things they shouldn't be doing, Daniel Bryan, I wish had the he's got a love of this that has endangered his health on several occasions before. So it doesn't surprise me that he's not deciding to just go home. But it also saddens me because, as Hamflett points out, he's at increased risk. Obviously, Brie is pregnant as we speak. Daniel Bryan himself is immunocompromised. I've got, in fact, no idea what he is playing at. I would love it if Cesaro were to advance and they could do an injury angle if they must do their usual no selling of this situation. They could do an injury angle just to excuse the fact that Daniel Bryan won't be seen for a while. And this pains me to say it, because Daniel Bryan's one of the few things that really connects me earnestly to this product. At the beginning of 2019, I pitched and thankfully got approved so many different pieces on how much of a genius Daniel Bryan was. He was so great at the beginning of last year, 2019, that I thought he was the undisputed best pro wrestler in the world. I looked forward to WWE Smackdown more than I did anything that New Japan Pro Wrestling was offering at the time. Obviously, AEW wasn't in full existence yet. So this truly pains me to say I don't want to see Daniel Bryan wrestle in WWE. He's the one thing I really look forward to every single week on SmackDown on Friday nights. He shouldn't be appearing. Like, none of them should be, but him in particular shouldn't be appearing. So I have to echo what Hamflett was saying. This will obviously be a great match. Daniel Bryan, not only he was so goddamn great at WrestleMania against Sami Zayn. The match was what it was. It was a lot of story. It felt like a first WWE act match. But when there was genuine competition between him and Sami Zayn, the work was spectacular. It was snug. It was a fight. It was everything that works in this unworkable situation. So yeah, I've got no doubt the match will be great because Daniel Bryan is a genius. He can operate in any context, and he's allowed to, where most wrestlers in WWE do not have any agency. It's going to be great. It just should not be happening.
Right, let's move on to some of your questions from the comment section. Thanks to Ethan Wendelken, who's given us a lovely donation and asked, how long do you think Drew will be champion? Hamlet, why don't you take this one?
Just hopefully for as long as it takes to get the crowds back in the building, however long that might as well be. He's young in WWE terms. He's in the prime of his career. And it would be just like a blot on his copybook if he was to win and lose the title in the empty arena era before even a single member of the audience has been able to enjoy the celebration of him as champion. It is almost as if, as we've often sort of fantasy booked the ways in which you could start a WWE show, the first one back with the crowd, that first night that you get to actually, that Drew McIntyre, WWE champion, will be received. It'd be such a shame if he's won and lost or traded that title before then. So I wish I had a deadline, and we'll go back to having crowds, but at very least when there's a crowd in the building.
I disagree. Sorry, I'll disagree, but I think they can have their cake and eat it too. If they get the first whiff when in fact they can return to arenas, the danger of these sliding ratings that we're seeing, and there's no sense that they're going to get arrested anytime soon, is that they might have to do something like a shock title switch in order to artificially spike them to appease the network. If that is indeed the case, and in fact, even if it isn't, I would still have Drew McIntyre lose and book his title rematch for the very first show back with fans, and then he can win it. It's something for the performer to relive that moment as it should have gone down in the first place. It's a ratings grab, and I think that week's going to be glorious when WWE and AEW return, if in fact it's all scheduled and coordinated. Because every single show that these companies run is going to be front loaded and gigantic because there's going to be a race to recapture the momentum. And I would have Raw begin on that note with Drew winning the title back.
I really like that. I sense that might be the direction they're going. Sarah Buglass, thank you for donation. Says, love the channel. How do you think the backlash from fans will affect the WWE profits, subscriptions, or viewership? Sige, why don't you take this one since you were just talking about viewership?
Yeah, the grim reality is that fan revenue barely accounts for the big financial picture of WWE. There's such a huge discrepancy, a huge difference between how unpopular that product is. And it's not just dickheads like me whinging about it in articles and on Twitter. Live gates are down. Network subscriptions have been down for ages. I think we will see a sharp decline that is well beyond the creeping decline we've seen over recent years. But the reality, and this is what makes it really quite hard to analyze WWE's product, is that the TV rights fees will prop them up. So in answer to your question, and thanks for your donation, I don't think fan resentment, which to be honest never really materializes in the ratings following a backlash, at least in this big sort of headline moment. It will happen gradually, but not in a headline moment. That won't affect it. What really might is how relatively little advertisers are willing to pay for slots, considering how few people are buying their product, and how that might in fact impact the payments WWE receives on that front.
Hamlet, what do you think to this?
Yeah, I mean, Cedric's touched on that there. I think it was late 2018, early 2019, where fan-generated revenue fell below 50% for the first time in the company's history. So at that point, they were like categorically serving different masters before the fan base, which was troubling, obviously, if you were trying to watch the show and just get the creative involvement out of it rather than having to think about why they might be doing things for business reasons instead. Also, historically, I don't really think that they've had any problem making people forget about other things that have offended the fan base at large. We all remember the cancel WWE Network hashtag the first time that came around, probably around Roman Reigns winning the Royal Rumble 2015. The outcry, rightfully so, of the deal with the Saudi Arabian Sports Authority that started in 2018 continues to this day, and the shows continue to run, not least surrounding the controversy around Crown Jewel 2018, which felt like such a moment where had they have pulled out from that show, they would have had years worth of good graces. They decided not to because they were chasing all the zeros on the end of that deal. They got through it and on they go. WrestleMania 36 for me mirrored that this year. Had they have pulled that, I think fan sentiment would have swayed strangely in their favor, but they were just very, very WWE about it. there was something as awful and as troubling as Wednesday was. The longer it went on, the more Vince McMahon and WWE it became. And I've used this analogy countless times, but his product is like a cigarette. If you can hook somebody really young, there's a good chance that you'll hook them for good and against their will, no matter if it's bad for your health, which is sometimes what this product feels. And I just sense that any outrage or any sadness or any network subscription cancellations can be turned around with the power of a good angle or a good moment or WrestleMania season with your friends. It's the wheels of capitalism as much as it is the wheels of World Wrestling Entertainment. And I just don't feel ultimately like this will have the impact we probably all wish it would.
Matt Rains, thank you for your donation, has commented, hey, Hamflet, if you don't apologise for Wednesday, I'm going to make you look like Walter.
And he's donated as well, so I can't even shoot, man. That's not fair.
Lincoln Jack Don Me, I always get your second name wrong. Lincoln Feet, thank you for your donation. Says, how long until the indies start running smoothly again? Also, can you guys do a regular call-in show for viewers with StreamYard? Just an idea. We'll look into that. Thank you for that, Lincoln. It's kind of inexplicable. It's impossible even, to put a date on this, Sige.
Yeah, it is. I suspect that you'll get a few chances who at the mere threat, and it feels like a threat at this point, of being allowed to go outside en masse, you might get a few chances who will sort of maybe prematurely do it. But I think the more prominent indies like GCW and sort of their peer groups will most certainly follow the example set by WWE. They are getting away with indirect murder. That's the genuine gist of all this. Like, they are getting away with genuinely potential indirect murder. We don't know who the employee was who tested positive. We don't know who we interacted with or said isolation. You can't take a goddamn thing these take seriously. So before they were classed as essential, they were breaking very stern guidelines. They were reminded of this. They were told they couldn't run, and yet they are still running. So I think that they are the flagrant worst offenders. AEW are in sharp silver medal second place. I think once they start running, the indies will follow suit, because the other two are feeling far more brazen about being out in the open. So I think we'll follow that trend.
It's a real shame.
I do worry about the indies.
It's such a shame as well, isn't it? Because like this is a time to kind of stand up and be counted. And I think we've kind of accepted AEW will follow the pattern set by WWE to a lesser degree. And it's almost like, well, like how much criticism should they come in for in comparison to WWE? But like New Japan, in contrast, have proven themselves the real babyface promotion. All this, they're paying their talent. They were the first to cut shows at great expense of their creative direction, like way before like this, Western promotions were on top of this. New Japan tried to get in front of it, which is what wrestling hasn't done. I would love to see, for example, Ring of Honor and Impact Wrestling, and then the indies such as GCW that could follow them. I would love to see all of them be covered in glory out of this, because there's been a lot in the wake of the releases where people have been asked, rightfully so, to support their favorite wrestlers in what could be a bit of a time of need, whether that's through pro wrestling tees or through Twitch streams or whatever it is that wrestlers do. It's a way to support the talent rather than the promotions that oversee the talent. And it would be quite fantastic if a company like Impact could claw back a bit of narrative that they were actually good in a situation like this.
Impact are doing it behind closed doors.
An Impact are about to do a behind closed doors wrestling show. Ring of Honor, who have struggled for the last couple of years with this awful reputation and lots of toxicity around that brand and falling crowds, if they could take a step back and protect their talent in the process, that would be potentially quite a huge moment for them going forward. But yeah, generally speaking, WWE and now to a lesser extent AEW will be the ones to set the agenda. New Japan is separate for it because it is literally and geographically separate from it. I don't feel like North American wrestling will do anything like that.
Final few questions for you guys here. Matt Rains says, a serious question: if you could only choose one of the release wrestlers, who are you most excited to see outside of WWE? Hamflet.
I'm gonna go with Carl Anderson in the G1, because his involvement with New Japan for the most part predates my personal interest, and I'd love to see this electric singles wrestler that I've been only be able to watch in the past on YouTube in the present on New Japan World.
For me, it would have to be Rusev in the same promotion, New Japan, more so than AEW. I just think he's could adjust his physical style to match up to the strong style. And also, he would be fantastic crack in the post-match press conferences where they've got about a minute. They can just say whatever the hell they like. And I think Rusev would operate perfectly without a microphone or a script.
No way, Jose, for me. Sidge, one person asked in the comment section your margarita recipe very quickly.
I go for 120 mils. I'm sorry if you're American. I'm doing it in milliliters. 120 mils of tequila, 60 mils of Cointreau. That's the orange liqueur. Do 2 limes, so it goes to about 45 to 50 mils. I am not a purist. I like the taste of a syrup. If you can't get agave syrup yourself, I've been told, and it's working quite nicely for me, to make your own mix. You just want to dissolve some sugar into water, and you can do a big batch of it if you so desire. I'll whack a little teaspoon each when I'm making a 2-drink setup with my shaker. Salt around the rim, which you can attach to the top of the rim with some ground salt. Put the rim on the salt with some lime juice, and then you've got to catch the margarita at the same time as those nice big thick salt crystals.
And finally, I wanted to ask you a question for Eric Vasquez. Your favorite memories of Howard Finkel, of course, you unfortunately lost this week.
Every single and new, not and the new Triple H, every single and new. The celebration of your favorite wrestler winning a world title was why you watched pro wrestling, and Howard Finkel was the soundtrack to every single one of those moments that mattered. It didn't even always matter if you didn't like the wrestler that did it. He made it feel so majestic and such an achievement. It was as great as any real sporting one. Anytime that anybody in wrestling makes it feel like real sport, they're a gift to the industry. He was.
I have to echo that as well. And the thing about Howard Finkel, I was lucky enough because I was really happy to do this. I wrote, under the circumstances, just as a measure of respect to writers, brief obituary on What Culture yesterday. And the way I put it is that what were ostensibly announcements were endorsements, because he made it feel like, you, God damn it, you're the champion now. Howard Finkel's even said it. That's what made it click into reality. If the Fink said that you were the champ, you were the goddamn champ. And obviously, I think it was David Bixenspan who uploaded the footage to Twitter without the commentators taking a crap on him, because he was bullied relentlessly by that hideous organization of his return that CM Punk demanded at Survivor Series 2011. I loved that moment watching it live. Adored it. Absolutely adored it.
Yeah, I'm glad that there's a version without Michael Cole being the puppet for Vince McMahon on there. A true legend. And of course, our thoughts go out to the Fink's friends and family at this difficult time. Thank you, everyone who's joined us for today. Thank you for your donations and your questions. We are going to make this a regular thing starting next week. 4 p.m. BST every day. We'll be previewing the likes of Raw, Wednesday Night War, SmackDown, of course, as we're doing right now. We'll also be doing a Q&A and probably some get the tables and stuff. So please do join us 4 p.m. every day, BST UK time from next week. But for now, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. You can let us know your Twitter questions at What Culture WWE. You can follow all three of us as well there. You can follow Michael Hamflett at
Michael Hamflett.
Follow Michael Sidgwick at.
You're just such a professional, Wilborn. I just want to put that over. You've been really good. At M Sidgwick.
Thanks, mate. You can follow me at Adam Wilborn. Follow our lovely editor, Phil, at Phil My Chambers. Follow us all at What Culture WWE, as I said. And make sure you subscribe to What Culture Wrestling for daily wrestling podcasts as well. But this has been the SmackDown preview. I mean, we didn't really preview that much of SmackDown. We had to talk about the awful things that WWE have done this week. But still, thank you so much for joining us. My thanks to the Dadley boys. And we will see you soon. Bye.